tool. It all started with a whisper. Not a headline, not a formal statement, but a casual remark that slipped out during a live stream no one thought would ever matter. A chuckle, a sip of coffee, and then 5 words that changed everything. He made $500,000. At first, there was no reaction. The comment was too offhand, too absurd to be taken seriously. But silence has a way of amplifying things, and before the laughter even faded, those words were echoing across the internet. $500,000 V. For a family that had built its brand on unity, humility, and shared sacrifice. That number wasn't just about money, it was a mirror, reflecting everything they claimed to be and everything they had secretly become. Fans dissected the clip, replaying it frame by frame. The timestamp became legendary, the way she laughed right after, nervous, hesitant sound, like someone who'd just realized the weight of what she'd said. The way her husband glanced at her, caught between joining the joke and changing the subject. Deaths. This wasn't just gossip, it was a revelation wrapped in awkwardness. 9 days of filming. That was the simple math. 9 days that were worth more than a year of family and faith combined. The irony was sharp and painful. For years, viewers had watched roofs leak, bank accounts strain, and the dream of Coyote Pass turn to dust. And now, suddenly, there was $500,000 for a show about endurance, while the endurance at home was quietly falling apart off-screen. It wasn't envy that fueled the online firestorm. It was a shared sense of sorrow, a quiet, intimate sadness. Because deep down, everyone understood this wasn't just about a TV show. It was about deception disguised as an opportunity. The man who was once a symbol of family togetherness had profited from the very destruction he'd caused, and the daughter who let the truth slip did so accidentally. Or maybe, just maybe, because a part of her wanted it out in the open. For the first time, fans weren't just asking what happened to the family. They were asking why. Why the silence? Why the distance? Why, after all this time, was the only sound left in that house the lonely hum of a single spotlight, holiday, $500,000, and the deafening silence it left behind? The clip went viral, but it started slowly. A few fan accounts trimmed the video, posting it with cautious captions like, "Did she really just say that?" and $500,000. Wait, what? But then, it exploded. By the next morning, the clip had jumped from private Patreon groups to Reddit forums, fan podcasts, and short-form videos with dramatic background music. The figure itself became a headline, $500,000 for 9 days. But the story behind it was much darker, too. For those who had followed this family from the very beginning, that number wasn't a symbol of greed, it was a measure of distance. It represented a man who once preached about simple living, now chasing paychecks the size of spotlights. It showed daughters who once called him their hero, now cackling through their discomfort because laughter was so much easier than honesty. The internet did what it always does. It analyzed, it deconstructed, and it exaggerated. Every second of that live stream was treated like evidence in a digital investigation that couldn't be stopped. The angle of her head, the slight hesitation before she spoke, that anxious smile, it all became forensic data. Was she just teasing him? Was it an accidental slip-up, or was she sending a message? The questions multiplied, but answers never came. And beneath all the noise, something more disturbing began to surface: the realization that the family's faith, once their solid foundation, had just become another part of the act. T had taught them years ago that faith was about perseverance, that the struggle itself was a sign of devotion, but perseverance doesn't sign contracts. It doesn't cash a check for $500,000 for a few stunts filmed under the desert sun. And yet, there he was, climbing, sweating, and surviving on national television, while his family endured their own private struggles in silence. When the viral video clip made its way to the family group chat, no one replied. Not a single message. Not even an emoji. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it just drops, heavy and invisible, into the spaces between people who have forgotten how to talk to each other. By the end of that week, the tabloids had their headlines. By the end of the month, the fans had all chosen sides. But in that silence, in the space between a daughter's joke and a father's non-response, lay a truth no one wanted to admit. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about what had taken the place of fame. The faith, the family, the easy laughter that once filled a living room, it all now existed in broken pieces, live streams, interviews, and the kind of public comments you can never take back. And through it all, that number just kept ringing. $500,000. A figure that meant nothing and, at the same time, everything. The camera caught him perfectly mid-climb, mid-breath, mid-life. The desert wind whipped across his face, the sun carving new lines into his skin. He looked like a man fighting against gravity, but anyone who had been paying attention knew better. This wasn't a test of endurance. This was image management. And for him, image had always been everything. He gripped the ladder as if it owed him something. Drung, felt like a year. Each pull upward a sermon, each heavy breath an echo of the speeches he used to give about strength, faith, and perseverance. But on this day, there were no wives cheering him on from below. No family waiting at the bottom. There was only a camera crew and a paycheck that turned his personal struggle into a public spectacle. The irony was cruel. For years he had preached to his family to hold to the iron rod, teaching them that their faith was about holding on, no matter how much it hurts. That faith isn't supposed to make you bleed, and family isn't supposed to be a ladder you climb all by yourself. The ladder creaked in the wind, and for just a split second, you could see it in his eyes. Doubt, not the kind of doubt that asks, "Can I do this?" but the kind that asks, "Why am I still doing this?" The instructor's voice boomed from above. "Keep going. Don't look down." And he didn't, because if he did, he would have seen everything that wasn't there. The faces that once looked up at him with devotion, the hands that once reached out to catch him, the family that once gave his climb meaning. Now, there was no conviction holding him up, no solid ground beneath his feet, only wind, silence, and the crushing weight of $500,000. When the show aired, viewers called it inspiring. They saw courage, stamina, and triumph. But those who were really listening heard something else entirely. They heard a man gasping for air through a cloud of regret. They heard the sound of a promise cracking under pressure. And they saw that ladder for what it truly was, not a test, but a confession. Because this climb wasn't about proving his strength, it was about denying his weakness. The kind of weakness that creeps in when pride is your only companion. When he finally reached the top, he smiled, arms raised in victory, a perfect shot for the camera. It looked like redemption. But anyone who knew the real story could see that flicker of hesitation in his eyes. The look that says, "You did it. But at what cost?" And far below, away from the desert sun and the TV lights, his daughter was watching. Not with anger, not even with sadness, just with a quiet sense of acknowledgement. Because she finally understood the ladder was never about the climb, it was about the lies that built it. The internet called it a slip, a careless moment, a laugh held for a second too long, a truth spoken a little too freely. But if you've ever lived in a house built on silence, you know that laughter is never truly careless. For McKelty, it was armor. It was her way of surviving the weight of things that were never meant to be said out loud. Laughter had always been currency in their family, the only thing that could buy a moment of peace in a home stretched to its breaking point. When tempers flared, she told a joke. When her mother cried behind a closed door, she spun a story to make everyone else smile. Laughter diffused the tension, or, at least, that's how it looked on TV. So when that moment on the live stream happened, when the secret of her father's $500,000 payday tumbled from her lips, the laugh that followed wasn't one of shock. It was a reflex. Because the truth had teeth. And laughter was the only defense she knew to keep from getting bitten. She watched the viral clip later, the freeze frames, the slow-motion replays, the endless fan theories. Her own face was picked apart like a crime scene. Look at how she smiles after she says it. She's totally teasing him. She didn't mean to say it. She knew exactly what she was doing. But nobody saw the part. They couldn't hear the heavy silence that followed. The text message from her father that never came. The unsent reply she typed and deleted. The painful realization that one single sentence had just lit a match to a house made of secrets. She didn't regret it. Not really. Because some truths are just too heavy to carry quietly. Payday. What she did regret was how it sounded, how it turned something sacred into something sordid, how the world managed to boil down years of love, anger, and complexity into one viral soundbite. That night, as darkness fell, she scrolled through old family videos, dinners at home, birthday parties, scenes from that desolate desert landscape that was once their future. And she saw a harsh reality. Her family had never really learned how to talk to each other without a camera lens in between. Her laugh, his silence, their distance, it all finally made sense. That $500,000 paycheck wasn't the wound. It was the scar proof that something had healed wrong a long time ago. When she finally closed her laptop that night, the room was quiet. But it was the kind of quiet that buzzes, the kind that fills the space where love used to be. She didn't cry. She just whispered the words she'd never say to anyone, the words the internet would never analyze. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just couldn't keep pretending anymore. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content that goes beyond the headlines. We'll see you in the next one. Hers. And then, quietly, almost as if confessing to herself, she laughed again. Because sometimes, that's the only thing you can do when the truth finally gets out. Coyote Pass was meant to be a promise, a fresh start, a piece of land where roots could find purchase and stories could begin anew. At least, that's what he told them. He spoke of it once, with eyes aglow, as a place where the family could be together, forever, a refuge constructed from red dust and hope. Each rock, each ridge, each stubborn blade of desert grass bore the weight of that dream. But the desert does not forgive delusion. It remembers everything. Today, the land lies still. The wind howls through half-excavated trenches and abandoned plots, past discarded blueprints, yellowing in sun-blasted binders. Every few months a drone video appears online, the type fans share with comments like, "Whatever became of Coyote Pass?" You can almost hear the silence in those videos. No laughter, no hammers, no progress. Just the husk of a promise, hung out to dry in the pitiless sky. The irony, that same desert was his stage, the setting for his next ascent, the one that paid him $500,000. The land he couldn't develop still enriched him, and perhaps that's the most heartless thing. Because to everyone else, the children, the wives, the believers who had once stood in that same dirt Coyote Pass, wasn't just land. It was faith made real. Evidence that all the strife had meaning. Evidence that the story wasn't finished yet. But now, the story was finished. Only the cameras didn't receive the memo. At night, when the wind blows through the sagebrush, it sounds almost human-like whispers snatched between the dunes. If you linger there long enough, you begin to hear the whispers of what was once spoken there. Promises, arguments, prayers, and then, in time, silence. Because silence always finds its way back home. And for this family, the desert was that home. But when McKelty drove past it last spring, she didn't stop. She later said she couldn't bear to look, that seeing the land still vacant would be too painful. But maybe it wasn't the emptiness that frightened her. Perhaps it was the reality that the land had already served its purpose. It had taught them what they really were, a family held together by faith, but torn apart by ambition. Bounded by love, shattered by silence. And somewhere, far outside the camera shots and episode edits, a man stood in that very same desert, looking out across the horizon. The wind pulled at his shirt. The dust swirled around his boots. He gazed out over acres of quiet and breathed a secret no one else would ever know. It was never about the land, because he finally knew. It was never about what they could create. It was about what they would give up just to claim they had tried. Her fingertips rested on the screen, words typed, deleted, three dots flashing, then silence. That's how most of their exchanges were. Now half beginnings and half finishes. Love expressed in drafts that never went out. The words she wanted to say weren't complex. They were 5 sentences long. "Dad, I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just said what everyone already knew. I miss when we could laugh without hurting each other." But the cursor flashed like a heartbeat, accusing, relentless, alive. And she deleted it then. Because how do you talk to someone who only hears when there's a camera around? How do you tell them I miss you when missing feels like a betrayal? Silence was simpler, expected. Safe, he sat in a silent kitchen across the state coffee, Lukewarm, phone face down, news headlines still open on the counter. He'd read the comments, of course. He's a sellout. He abandoned them. This is karma. But the ones that hurt were the ones that didn't use his name. The ones that said, I used to look up to him, because that meant once, just once, they actually did. He thought about calling her. He even practiced it in his head. Start with a joke, tone it down, picture her laughing the way she used to. But then his chest constricted. He could almost hear her voice soothing, mature now, not the little girl who had outrun him through Coyote Pass dust storms. And the reality hit him harder than any headline. She didn't need him anymore. He reached for his phone, swiped through his contacts until her name popped up, McKelty, with a heart emoji, a reminder of a bygone time. He composed, I saw what you said. Then hesitated. What next? It's okay. Too little, I forgive you. Too proud, I love you. Too exposed? He deleted every word, leaving only silence, the one thing they still had in common. The phone screen went dark, and elsewhere, miles of desert and memory away. Two people sat in separate rooms, staring at the same unanswered message and asking themselves if silence had finally become their only language. There are two types of contracts in life, the ones you sign and the ones you vow. He'd signed a lot of the first kind. Network contracts, appearance releases, filming permissions, endless words in ink that promised cash, ratings, and visibility. But the second type, the ones you swear silently in front of family, in front of God, those were harder to keep, because no one could collect the price but yourself. The day he signed the Special Forces contract, he didn't read the fine print twice. He saw the figure. He saw the opportunity. $500,000 and maybe, for once, a chance to be seen as strong again. Not as the man who lost his family. Not as the husband who shattered a dream, but as someone who could still rise, still endure, still conquer. He didn't realize he was signing something much larger, an agreement, not with a network, but with destiny itself. Because every agreement has a clause. You never see a secret exchanged between the lines. And this one was simple. He would win the prize, but lose the story that made it worth winning. And his daughter had her own agreement, the unspoken moral one, duty to protect the family name, even when it no longer protected her. To uphold the brand, even if it meant lying. She too stood at a crossroads. The offers had started coming, in podcasts, interviews, partnerships, each one asking for the same thing, her story of what really happened. She could tell it. She could finally speak her truth. How the silence wasn't just emotional, it was contractual. How the family had learned to live on NDAs and non-disclosures, where truth was itemized and trademarked. But she hesitated, because truth, once spoken aloud, doesn't go back. And some silences, once broken, can't be repaired. That week, she opened the same message thread again, the one with no replies. Still empty, still waiting. But instead of typing, this time, she just scrolled up past the old jokes, the birthday emojis, the pictures where laughter actually meant something. At the very top, she stopped. A message from years ago. His words plain, we don't quit on each other, ever. She stared at it until the screen went dark, then locked her phone and whispered into the darkness. Then why did you? Very moment. In a different state, he was signing another extension, another appearance, another check, still chasing redemption on paper. But for the first time, his signature shook. And perhaps, just perhaps, he finally realized some deals aren't meant to be signed, but only to be honored. It wasn't supposed to be sensational. Just another midweek, well-lit, soft-seated interview, the kind that fills airtime between bigger stories. A daughter talking about family, healing, and what she'd learned. At least, that's what the producers had promised. But truth rarely stays quiet when the cameras start rolling. The studio lights buzzed low, warm but intense. She sat there, posture guarded, smile practiced, her professional daughter now. They asked about motherhood, about balancing privacy with publicity, about growing up on television. She answered softly, thoughtfully. And then came the question, the one nobody had run by her. Do you still speak with your dad? Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you found it compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content. Your support means the world. See you next time. Her throat constricted. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Even the crew, seasoned professionals, seemed to hold their collective breaths. And then, for the first time, instead of dodging, instead of laughing it off like she always did, she spoke the truth. Not much anymore, she whispered. Sometimes, silence is the only way left to love someone who doesn't know how to hear you. There was no anger, no accusation, only truth, clean, quiet, and unedited. The interviewer blinked, caught off guard, unsure whether to press forward or pull back. But she continued, her voice gaining strength, even as her heart quivered beneath the table. He taught me to be tough, to believe, to battle for family. I just don't think he ever understood that sometimes. That battle is leaving. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't staged. But as her words settled, the entire room felt the change. The camera captured something rarer silence that wasn't hollow, but sincere. Later, when the interview aired, the internet reacted differently. They didn't clip it for ridicule or memes. They posted it. They shared it, labeling it raw, real, painful but necessary. Even those who had judged her for months paused, just for a moment, and truly listened. And in another house, somewhere miles away, he watched it too. Alone. The lights were out, a half cup of coffee gone cold on the table beside him. Her words struck him like stones, not hard enough to break, but heavy enough to linger. He didn't fire back this time. He didn't write a response or flip through old photo albums. Teat just sat there, staring at the screen. As her final line echoed through the speakers, sometimes silence is the only way left to love someone. For the first time in decades, he finally understood. Her silence wasn't a punishment. It was her limit. It was her method of surviving the chaos he created. And as the credits rolled, he whispered to the empty room, words no one else would ever hear. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, unrecorded, unanswered, but finally spoken. And somehow, that was enough. The wind hadn't changed. It still carried that dry, restless murmur, like a half-remembered voice from the past. The horizon was the same, too sharp, infinite, and baked by the sun. But they were different now. Days apart, without the other knowing, they both returned. They weren't drawn back by nostalgia, but by something softer, the quiet pull of untold stories. He was the first to arrive. His truck idled on the edge of the property, dust swirling around the tires. This was the same earth he once called sacred, the land where he had sworn they would all build a life together. Now, it was just emptiness and sagebrush. A ghost town of good intentions. He stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the dry ground. Every sound echoed. The creak of the door, the sigh of wind through the fence rails. Even his own breathing felt too loud, out of place. He looked around and whispered, almost to himself, "You were worth more than this." He wasn't sure if he was talking about the land, the family, or both. For years, he had convinced himself that everything he did for them. That his refusal to surrender was a sign of strength. But standing there, under that same unforgiving sun, he finally saw the truth. He hadn't been protecting anything. He'd been making deals, trading faith for fame, unity for survival, and love for a legacy. The air shifted slightly. For a fleeting instant, he could have sworn he heard laughter soft and distant. The sound that used to fill this desert when the children were small. It wasn't real, of course. Just a memory. But it was enough to make him close his eyes and finally let the silence rest inside him, instead of fighting against it. A few days later, she came back too. No cameras, no live streams, no audience, just her, a borrowed car, and the long highway that once felt like home. When she reached the ridge overlooking the property, she stopped. She gazed out over the same ribbon of dirt she'd run across barefoot as a girl, and felt a strange mix of loss and gratitude. So much had been lost here: dreams, loyalty, innocence. But something else had grown in its place: understanding. She knelt down, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust, the same way she did as a child, and she whispered, "It's okay now." She hadn't meant to say it to anyone, but as the words left her lips, the wind seemed to fall silent. just for a moment, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Miles away, he looked up at that same instant, sensing something he couldn't name. A profound quiet, an echo of peace. Neither of them would ever say it out loud, but maybe, just maybe, for the first time in years, their silence wasn't splitting them apart, was binding them together. The desert doesn't keep secrets, just hides them until someone is finally ready to listen. That night, the sun set slowly over Coyote Pass. The sky blazed with gold, then crimson, then faded into darkness. And for the first time in a very long time, two souls stood under that fading light, not together, but close enough for the space between them to hum with unspoken energy. V didn't speak. There were no tears, no grand apologies, no scripted reunion. There was only the wind, the heavy weight of the years, and the faint memory of who they used to be. He looked across the expanse of dust and saw her silhouette against the horizon. A woman now, harder, quieter, and unbreakable. And in her stillness, he saw everything he had sacrificed in his desperate attempt to be seen. She turned her head, just a fraction. Their eyes met, a brief, charged silent exchange. 1,000 words passed between them in a single breath, and in that instant, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't closure. It was something more precious, recognition. They didn't need to talk. The silence spoke for them. It said, "We both tried, we both failed, and somehow, that's okay." The wind picked up, carrying that unspoken truth across the empty acres. A tumbleweed rolled across the same soil where their dreams once lay scattered, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a new beginning they didn't have to share. Later, as she drove away, she glanced once in the rearview mirror, watching the shape of the land recede behind her. A place that once meant everything, now simply meant peace, stayed a while longer. He watched her headlights disappear down the dirt road, then looked up at the sky and murmured, $500,000. And there was no bitterness in his voice this time. Only AW, because somewhere between money and memory, between pride and pain, he had finally learned the one lesson fame could never teach him, that silence isn't empty. It's full of all the things we're too afraid to say.